items for consideration and possible action. 3A. First of all, is there anyone signed up to speak on 3A?
Yes, ma'am. We have two
Okay.
speakers registered.
2 people registered? Okay. Do we want to hear them now or afterwards?
No, ma'am, I would suggest that we take staff presentation first, and we're getting them loaded.
Okay, very good. So this 3A is a presentation on Central Williamson Creek Greenway Vision Plan. I believe you're going to repeat yourself on this, Commissioner Coyne.
I am, so I'm going to turn my video off. I'll be back when I'm ready. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, commissioners. Can we get the PowerPoint pulled up, please? Great, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for your service on the Environmental Commission. My name is Siobhan Otero, Community Coordinator at Community Powered Workshop, and we are an Austin-based nonprofit organization that works alongside communities to create powerful and equitable places, and we do this through collaborative planning, community-driven research, and social impact design. And in the spirit of our collaborative working group model, we have a few presenters tonight who will talk about the Central Williamson Creek Greenway Vision Plan, including Leah Gibson, Conservation Program Coordinator at Watershed Protection Department and City Working Group Member, Steve Prather, Southwood Neighborhood Resident and Community Working Group Member, and Claire Edelman-Heath, Project Manager with Asakura Robinson. And to give a little bit of background on this project, in 2017, our organization Community Powered Workshop was approached by local community leaders to support a process that would enable residents to reimagine the green space along Central Williamson Creek as a resilient, healthy, and connected greenway. And since then, we have been building relationships and working alongside Southwood and Heartwood neighborhoods, including homeowners, renters, and sheltered individuals, recreation advocates, and city department representatives through an engaged process that continues today. Over the last year, Community Powered Workshop has facilitated the convening of an 8-member community working group to bring local voices and perspectives to the table, along with the city working group composed of staff from multiple City of Austin departments and local staff from the National Park Service. And the goal of this convening has been to build long-term collaborative working relationships. And now I'll pass it off to Leah Gibson from the Watershed Protection Department, who is also a member of the city working group. Thank you.
I'm Leah Gibson, and I'm a land manager with Watershed Protection. I oversee and coordinate land management activities on watershed properties, many of which happen to be buyout sites. And as a part of my role, I'm responsible for developing and implementing management plans that take into account the opinions of the neighborhood while balancing the need for our department to fulfill our mission areas. We typically launch our own outreach efforts, but in the case of these buyouts, along this segment of Williamson Creek, we've had the opportunity to work with this vision planning team starting in 2019. And participating in a process like this, where they're using multiple strategies to engage a community during a year that has been one of the most difficult times for engagement, has provided us with a well-rounded collection of feedback that helps support our own outreach efforts. And through this process, we've also been able to have meaningful and transparent discussions with participants about process, regulatory, or budgetary constraints that may apply to certain ideas or projects that are proposed in the plan. And while we support the outcomes of the vision planning process and we support the ideas proposed, I do want to make it clear that additional engagement will be required in order to move forward with implementing many of the projects that are proposed. And what that might look like could vary, but we encourage this plan to be an ongoing conversation between city staff, neighbors, and community partners as we move through the next steps together. So I will pass it to Steve next.
Thanks, Lee. My name's Steve Prather, and I've been a member of the Central Williamson Creek Working Group over the past year. And this vision plan that we're presenting is the culmination of several years of work by neighborhood residents and volunteer groups. The project consists of 58 acres of parkland and 16 acres of floodplain buyout properties along the creek and some of the tributaries from Menchaca Road to South Congress. I also want to mention for the record that I recently started a part-time position in the City of Austin Parks Department and will be transitioning out of my role in this community working group. So for more than 20 years, residents have discussed and imagined ways to preserve and protect this corridor and make it more connected and accessible where possible. We've done creek cleanups, invasive species removals, and hosted community potlucks and nature walks. 2 community gardens were established in addition to wildflower meadows and the Tom Donovan Trail. In 2019, community leaders in the Southwood neighborhood partnered with several volunteer groups and nonprofits, which included Community Powered Workshop, Public Green and Wild, the Nature Conservancy, and the National Park Service. 4 public events were held called Explore Williamson Creek, which was an opportunity for people to connect and discuss the possibilities and challenges. Also, Watershed Protection Department conducted a survey of residents living in the Richmond tributary buyout area to determine preferences and concerns about the buyout properties. In 2019, the results of a healthy park study was published by the St. David's Foundation and the Trust for Public Land. And the neighborhoods adjacent to Central Williamson Creek were rated as highly deficient and usable parkland. Then in 2020, a grant was awarded by the foundation to the Nature Conservancy for the purpose of creating a vision plan for the Greenway. And later an RFQ was issued and Asakura Robinson landscape architects were brought on board. A community working group made up of residents active in the community were selected to help engage and gather input from residents. A city working group of staff from primarily watershed protection and parks were involved in the vision planning process as part of the goal in building long-term collaborative working relationships between communities and public land managers. Throughout the planning process, community members and city staff were placed on equal footing as a way to balance community priorities with the lowest possible impact to the surrounding environment. A series of online public events, storytelling activities, and informal creek chats were held online and at socially distanced pop-ups where participants could pick up a pack of printed materials in English and Spanish. In an effort to be transparent and inclusive, the public could view the plan as it evolved online and make comments through the social pinpoint map and vote on which ideals should be prioritized in the vision plan with Creek Ideal cards. The end result was a community-led process with support from the City of Austin and local nonprofits. With that, I'll turn it over to Claire Edelman-Heath with Asakura Robinson.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, I'm Claire Edelman-Heath. As Steve said, I'm a landscape architect with Asakura Robinson, and I've been fortunate to be the project manager for the Central Williamson Creek Precision Plan. If I could ask our host to advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we'll begin by just taking a look at some of the beauty that's currently in the Greenway. This is a photo from last summer. So advance one more slide. And this is another look a bit further in another section of the Greenway and a glimpse at some of the rim rock that we've gotten to see. Advance one more, please. Here's a short outline of some of the community engagement that Steve described, and many activities that went into this process. Advance, please. And then taking a look at the design process, so moving from what Steve described and then kind of giving a visual timeline from the last 10 to 11 months. We began with an in-depth site inventory and analysis, working with the community, city, and also key stakeholders such as the Nature Conservancy to really understand the site. From there, we moved into developing 4 goals. These are really the vision statements for Central Williamson Creek Greenway. From that process and another mapping exercise, we heard a robust amount of ideas for the Greenway. We took those ideas and presented them back to the community, provided them to the community with lots of input and how that they would correspond to the vision statement, working through with the community and the city to understand which ideas were best suited for the Greenway itself. Once we had a clear picture of that, then we began to apply those ideas to the Greenway, to physical locations. And for the last 4 months, we've been refining that and representing it into the final vision plan document. So go to the next slide, please. So taking a step back and looking at our overall area, we begin in the west at Menchaca Road, just south of Stasny. And then flowing with the creek, we move east to our final boundary at South Congress Avenue. And what we have is a series of watershed protection-owned floodplain buyouts that have been described, as well as PARD-owned properties. Next slide, please. So when I spoke to the 4 vision statements from the community and city earlier, this is what I was referring to. So we see the future Central Williamson Creek Greenway as a restored, biodiverse greenway, a community-centered greenway, an accessible and visible greenway, and an active and connected greenway. And continue, please. So now, these are the top ideas when I talked about that idea process. These are the top ideas that we heard from the community that should really be a part of this Greenway vision. You'll notice that they're color-coded based on the color coding we used in the vision statement. There's not an equal distribution of ideas, but many of the ideas serve multiple purposes. For example, nature play, first and foremost, is kind of a community-centered support, but it also could be considered an activity. So as a secondary use, it helps create active lifestyle throughout the Greenway. So advance to the next, please. So now taking a look, this is how we applied the ideas and concepts to the overall vision plan, beginning again at Menchaca on the left of the screen and moving to South Congress at the right. You'll see that many of the ideas are repeated, so there's multiple instances for people throughout neighboring communities to get to engage with the Greenway, as well as 3 miles of trail and a mountain bike network, and on-street bike lanes that also serve as potential high water routes during storm events. Advance, please. Thinking of implementation, we've separated the projects into 3 tiers. These tiers are based on the ideas that I spoke to. So Tier 1 consists of community-led collaborations with the city. Tier 2 are city landowner projects that would be $50,000 or less. And some of them have a component for community participation or volunteerism. And finally, Tier 3 are much larger scale projects, $50,000 above. And those focus on concepts like land acquisition, the on-street bike lanes, and large-scale green infrastructure. And you'll notice if you look at the distribution, we've listed out which ideas belong in each tier. And we've really focused on the majority of the ideas being in Tier 1 to help continue that community and city collaboration. If you'll advance to the next, please. So continuing on this topic of implementation, our evaluation and opinion of probable costs was a very affordable plan, partially because of this great volunteerism and community-driven aspect of the plan. So overall value is just above $2 million, with also potential, and that doesn't factor in potentials for grants, support from wonderful organizations like the Austin Park Foundation and similar circumstances. Next, please. Finally, when we talk about some of the environmental and sustainable aspects, one piece that we've tracked throughout the process is a potential for this project to be a sustainable site, which is one of the kind of best certifications, showing or demonstrating a sustainable practice within a project. So the vision plan right now meets pre-certification, and if implemented, we feel that it would be in the gold to platinum range. And then just to further support it within the vision plan document, we've included an appendix that has materials and plants criteria to help be a guideline for large and small projects moving forward. Next slide, please. Now we can open it up for discussions. I just want to give a final photo credit to Steve, who went out during our recent winter storm to get this beautiful snowy photo of the Greenway.
Questions for commissioners? I don't see anyone. Oh, there we go. Yes.
Hi, Commissioner Barrett Bixler. My question is, what were the, was there kind of a single, like, largest concern from the community? If there were community concerns, like, did you find a pattern? Or I was just curious if the community had any, like, objections or concerns to this, because it seems like a great project. So.
We haven't had, in terms of concerns from the beginning, like, or concerns from feedback from the final piece, or kind of where we are now, I guess.
Thank you.
I can speak a little to, at least in the engagement process, we heard a lot of conversations and concerns around individuals experiencing homelessness along the creek. So we connected with the Other Ones Foundation, which is a local organization that works to support unsheltered individuals and provides services, and also works with the city on PARD and watershed land. And they connected us with somebody with lived experience that we were able to bring onto the community working group as our community mentor in that process, since and involving people in the vision planning process. So we worked with TOOF to get access to resources to participate in since we had to do everything virtually, they had the facilities to provide for them to join in on the virtual conversations. And we continue to collaborate with them, hoping that as we move forward with implementation, we can continue partnership. And, it's a complex issue. It's hard to address, and it takes everybody in our different roles to try to provide collaborative solutions around this. So that is something that came up in our engagement process that continues to be discussed. So we're continuing to work with partners and city folks and people involved in that process.
Thanks, Siobhan. I'm sorry, I think my audio wasn't very good earlier, but I would agree that's the top, one of the top concerns. I think secondly is there are a few areas where we have property that goes directly to the edge of the creek. So one of the ways that we address that to maintain connectivity are the high water routes I spoke to, so that people can continue to feel connected. Regardless, it would be great in the future if we can, there are acquisitions and easements that make full connectivity possible in those short stretches, but we wanted to provide it regardless.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
Okay. I just had a couple of things, and I guess they are along that topic. I would like to just point out some things that I would like for people to consider when they are going forward with this. It's really fabulous, and I thank everybody for their efforts, number one. I would like for people to consider clean water versus the homeless in the parks. There are a couple of reasons for that. If people are too close to the park, if there's flooding, it could create a very bad emergency. The other thing is, I know that we're all aware of like Lake Austin with the blue-green algae where the dogs can't swim, it's harmful. I know that we all know that when you go to Barton Springs, they say certain days you can't swim because there's a high count of E. coli. So I'm not sure that people that are camping there have the benefit or the luxury of knowing that perhaps the creek isn't where they should be at that time. I know that I read it and I understand the resettlement issues with the homeless and the loss of their clothing and so forth. I would like for you to weigh that against the versus of the loss of habitat for wildlife. Because I know in my park, we had a herd of deer, which we no longer have because people have killed the deer for food. So I think everything needs to be in a balance, and I am not speaking against the homeless. I am saying, number one, for flooding and for water quality, these are people that have no idea. They don't have an email that we can send to them. So if you were going to say that it's okay for people to camp there, are you willing to take the responsibility if there is a flood for them to not know that they are safe? And if the creek, if so many people camp near the creek that the water quality is degraded, we just need to figure some of these things out. And also the loss of habitat for the wildlife. So those are three issues that I would like for you to please consider. And you do not hopefully hear me saying that I am against people having a place to live, but I would just like for them to be safe, especially if it's on city property. Thank you.
Does anyone else have comments or questions? Board members?
Yeah,
Madam,
this is Commissioner Rick. I have a concern regarding flooding along the creek. It's been my experience in the Bull Creek area that flash floods have destroyed previous improvements that have been made by the city along parks. And in reviewing the materials that have been provided, I see a lot of improvements that are really adjacent to the creek and could be at risk in the case of a flash flood. We're going to be pouring a lot of effort and money into this type of improvements, which are good and everything, but I'm concerned adequate attention has not been paid to the fact that these improvements could be washed away with the next heavy rainstorm that might come, our way this spring or in the fall or something like that. I'd like to make sure that those concerns have been addressed. And this gets back to the homeless concerns earlier, the safety of people living near the creek. Can they be adequately informed in case of, a flash flood event that might come along?
Thank you for addressing those points. If I may, I can speak a little bit to that. We, as far as individuals experiencing homelessness along the Greenway, we, on the behalf of Community Powered Workshop, facilitating this community engagement process, believe that it's more of a systems issue rather than an individual's issue, and it's moving people from place to place isn't part of the solution. And so we're hoping that this vision plan can present opportunities to collaborate on what may work. And so in regards to safety of people along the Greenway, we talked about, can there be a system with weather signage or like raising a flag that a flash flood is about to occur? Because yes, people do not have the same access to resources and communications that we do in our privileged positions. So can there be a system to provide safety for all? It is a complex conversation, but the more that we can not be fearful in having these conversations and just figure out solutions from the city side, the community side, your roles as commissioners and supporting some of these ideas in the vision plan that address solutions, then hopefully that can start to open up some avenues for real solutions.
Any further questions? I have one, but is there anyone else out there have not?
Madam Chair, we also have 2 registered speakers on this
Yes.
item whenever you wish to take them.
Yes. What I'm wondering, and I tried to look at that map, and I guess my eyes are blown even with bifocals, but what I couldn't figure out is how many miles of trail for the mountain bikes that y'all were planning. And are there any trails going into any sensitive areas of the creek? And I wanted to know how y'all are going to, how are the walking trails and the mountain bike trails going to interact?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, I guess, first we separated the mountain bike and pedestrian trails as much as possible. So they're distinct from each other, and we recommended signage to indicate also their separateness, just to help protect those clashes that can happen. All of the trails are set. We had a really wonderful opportunity to go out and map the critical environmental features along the Greenway with watershed protection, and we included a 50-foot buffer away from those. So there's only 2 circumstances, I believe, within the vision plan where we looked at asking for nature trails for educational opportunities to go closer than 50 feet to those critical environmental features, but otherwise they're all set back from there.
That's great news. Before we go to our speakers, the last thing I do want to comment on is that I did read an email earlier today from a neighborhood group that wants to continue to be included with this process. And hearing all of this briefing, it sounds like y'all are continue this inclusiveness with neighbors and neighborhood associations. And so, of course, we just want to encourage that to proceed. So we can now go to our speakers. Chris, how are we going to bring the speakers on?
Yes, ma'am, we'll get them loaded. Michael Fossum, you'll be first, and you'll have 3 minutes. 1 moment, I guess. Michael, you should be able to unmute and begin speaking.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
My name is Michael Fossum. I'm with the Austin Heritage Tree Foundation, and I live in South Austin, in the Battle Bend Springs neighborhood. I would ask that you please delay approval of the plan and assign it to the tree group of the Environmental Commission for further discussion. The delay is necessary to address possible environmental damage to the creek. The following items are of concern. The design of the project appears to have been done by a PARD planner, not Deanne Williams, PARD Nature Trail Group Manager. We have met with Ms. Williams on proposed trails in the Williamson Creek Greenbelt, and the guidelines we reviewed with her would not result in the current plan. It looks like it is proposed to use the dry creek bed as part of the trail. This can degrade the creek. Mountain bikers love to go off trail, so you would soon see trails branching off the creek bed, causing erosion. The trail shows multiple paths and loops. A single trail would be sufficient without crowding out wildlife and preserve greenbelt area and creek banks. The mountain biking area is an attractive nuisance as the mountain bikers are well known for riding far outside designated areas. Design the trail to keep users on the designated track as much as possible. Amenities should not be put in flood-prone areas, or floodplain areas, rather. This was a disaster at Horseshoe Falls on Bull Creek in 2013. Amenities and 3 heritage trees that had been recently aerated were washed away by a flood that was intensified by the changes that had been made. Changing flows in creeks can have severe consequences. Thank you.
Unless there are questions for that speaker, we can move to our second speaker, Zoila Vega. You will also have 3 minutes, so you should be able to unmute and speak.
Okay. This is Zoila Vega Marchena. We live right to the east of where the plan ends. We're a neighborhood, and we're a contact team called East Congress Team, and we didn't know anything about this plan. And we're very upset about it because whatever happens upstream is going to affect us downstream. We also have been in a lot of communication in the past years with the neighborhoods of Southwood and Harwood, and they know that we're very interested in the activities on the creek. Our neighborhoods are opposed to a lot of excessive trails or mountain bike trails in the creek. So we have not been included. I had no idea that this was happening until yesterday. I think I'm asking that you please delay this so that we can provide feedback on the plan. What's worrying me more than anything is I've been worried on this for years, since 2014. I was a member of the Urban Trails Citizen Advisory Group, and I studied all the issues. Those were urban trails with concrete, but those issues are similar with nature trails. They're going to be maintained by volunteers. They're all over the creek, and it's not just one trail. It's trails with circles and feeders and this and that on both sides of the steep slopes. It's not a matter of just looking for the CEFs. You have to look at sensitive areas. Sensitive areas like the steep slopes of a creek or the dry bed of a creek. Even in Imagine Austin, they say that the greenways, the green belts could be greenways, but it had to be a balance with wildlife and trees. We talked to Deanne Williams, and she said, no, all these nature trails go through some guidelines. And those guidelines are, we try to just have one trail. We don't go on both sides of the creek. We don't go in circles. We don't go on feeders. Again, remember that these are going to be maintained by volunteers. First flood, everything is washed out. You have to start all over again. But when it gets washed out, all of that stuff comes downstream and damages all the trees, all the way, with all the rocks and everything. So it affects us, and we should have been included, but we had no idea. So please, give us a chance to provide feedback on this plan. Not later, because I know the story very well. They're saying, oh, yes, this is just a footprint. It's going to change as time goes by. No, this is the basis of the plan, and we have not been able to provide any comments. So please allow us to have some comments and don't approve it today. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I speak?
Yes.
I would love to get her contact information so that we may be able to stay in touch with outreach. And I apologize that we were not in communication on that. We, with the pandemic, had limited capacity on some of our outreach and not being able to visit organizations in person. And we did lose a critical partner with the Nature Conservancy due to budget cuts with COVID-19. So not excusing that at all. I think that none of this is set in stone, and there's opportunity to collaborate moving forward. And we'll say that it did include the South Austin Combined Neighborhood Plan and Southeast Combined Neighborhood Plan, along with other citywide plans in the development of the Greenway Vision Plan. So if I can somehow get her contact information, then we can, see what feedback can be shared and what that looks like moving forward.
Could you also mention your timeline? What's next? You're at the Environmental Commission, so that these citizens know how quickly this is moving forward.
So next, we present at the Parks and Recreation Board on April 27th. This is for review. That commission board meeting is for adoption. And then from there, it's moving forward with ideas as the community wants through this. We're offering a community grant to support small implementation projects from Tier 1. And those will be, like Claire was talking about, community-led, volunteer-led with collaboration with land managers at the city. So that's in the near future next steps. But we do want to make sure that all voices are heard. And I do apologize for that oversight. We definitely had a learning curve in trying to pivot everything virtually, and we would like to stay in touch moving forward and discuss what that looks like today.
I'd like to add something if I can. I just want to reiterate that we will require for anything on our property for that those proposals to go through another round of engagement and obtain more feedback from the community. And we did make sure during this process that participants were aware of the processes required to implement some of these, and that these are ideas that will then have to go through a process where there might be certain constraints, and we might have to do some consulting with the floodplain office to get something to where it is actually appropriate on a certain property. And so prior to implementing anything, I just want to make sure it's known that we will be following those processes as well.
Commissioner Thompson?
Hi, I wanted to make sure that you would add Mario Cantu. I think that's who you were referring to, Linda. He sent us an email. He's with the South Congress Combined Neighborhood Plan Contact Team, and they would like to be on your list of people to be informed of the progress and made aware of the plan, please.
Yes, I reached out to him. Thank you for making us aware of that.
Any further discussions, commissioners? I think that in the recommendation, I could support this if we say something to the effect that between now and the 27th, that a workshop or a session with specific people that felt they'd been left out in the process, that they somehow contact them and go above and beyond to ensure that the citizens that we've heard from feel included in this scope of work. And it would be great if that could happen prior to the Parks Board meeting. Commissioner Thompson?
I just wanted to mention one more thing. I know a lot of these places are in FEMA floodplains, so I just wanted to make sure that we are in compliance with those rules.
Okay. So we are on agenda item 3A. It's a consideration and possible action item from the environmental commissioners. Do we have a motion for this item?
Madam Chair, I have a motion that's under press right now.
Let's give you a minute to craft something. When you're ready.
And Madam Chair, we just want to recognize that our new Commissioner Brimmer has joined us. And he's been here for this item, but just to note that.
Thank you. And Coyne is recusing. All right. Thank you.
I have a recommendation, Madam Chair, if you're ready.
Yes, sir.
All right, on agenda item 3A, the Central Williamson Creek Greenway Vision Plan. And whereas the Environmental Commission recognizes the Central Williamson Creek project team has been developing a vision plan since June 2020 for Williamson Creek between Manchaca Road and South Congress in South Austin. Whereas the Environmental Commission recognizes the draft vision plan includes 3 tiers of engagement and implement from Tier 1, which are community-led, Tier 2, which are City of Austin projects less than $50,000, and Tier 3, which are City of Austin projects more than $50,000. The Environmental Commission recommends support of Central Williamson Creek Greenway Vision Plan with the following conditions. I have 3. The Environmental Commission recommends that the South Congress Combined Neighborhood Plan Contact Team be involved in future studies, input, feedback, and working groups related to the Williamson Creek Greenbelt. The Environmental Commission recommends reaching out to neighborhood associations upstream and downstream of this section of Williamson Creek and, to the maximum extent practicable, meeting with these groups prior to the Parks Board later this month. And the third, Environmental Commission recommends that trails and improvements avoid, to the maximum extent practicable, CEFs and 50-foot setbacks around these features.
All right, I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
You have a second from Commissioner Bedford. Any other further discussion? I'm going now into roll call. Commissioner Creel?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett Bixler?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Guerrero? Yes. Commissioner Brimmer?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedford?
Yes.
Motion carries 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. Thank y'all so much. We appreciate y'all coming to us tonight. Happy trails. Definitely.
Thank you, commissioners.
All right. We're happy you have joined us, Commissioner Brimmer, and we will get a little short introduction to you at the end of the meeting before we adjourn tonight. All right.